It's all about the cash, right? All about the money. All about the money. And in a way, we're seeing something happen that we're seeing across the NIL debate with the current college football playoff revenue distribution debate. The NCAA and mainly and also the conferences, they are trying to put a cap on the players' revenue and what they're making. Right now, we know, we've said on the show, it's about 9% roughly of the athletic budgets going to the players. They want to keep it that way. That's their ultimate goal because they don't want to get to a point where a collective bargaining agreement and a players association has that number rise, even to the levels, and it's not near the levels of the other pro leagues, but the NFL players get 49.5% of the money that comes in from the media contracts. That goes to the salary cap. We're seeing that play out right now behind the scenes in reports that the SEC and the Big Ten are pushing and shoving their weight around against the Big 12, the ACC, and everyone else for the vast majority of the revenue that will be made from the college football playoff moving forward if they go to this 14-team model. They also want to set precedent of this, saying, hey, there's going to be a super conference. If you want to be a part of wherever we're headed, you're going to take this in the grand scheme of things. You're going to take this in return for being a part of our plan that we're going to do with or without you. That's being met with some pushback. But, Chad, ultimately, what other recourse does the ACC or the Big 12 have if they're being told by the Big 10 and the SEC, hey, we're going to do this. We want to expand. We're going to 14. Eventually, we'll see 16. Maybe we see the super conference sooner rather than later. But if you want to survive, you need the revenue from what we're doing on the platform that currently provides the meaningful games of the college football postseason. That's it. It's the college football playoff. How much have we referenced the bowl season and the impact of what it's going to have on the offseason? We haven't. It's been the college football playoff. Instead of 4, it's going to 12, then 14, then 16, and then whoever wants to be a part of it can be a part of it. And those that are will survive as long as you're attached in some way to whatever these other two conferences are doing.
It's interesting to me how college football is selectively eviscerating itself. And here's what I mean by that. It has become survival of the fittest. And to an extent, college football at the highest level has always been survival of the fittest. It's the haves and the have-nots. But for years, the haves and the have-nots in some instances were allowed to play the same sport and exist in the same game. And I would argue it's led to a very good product and a very profitable product. But is it profitable enough? That is the fundamental question of capitalism in America. Is it really profitable enough? Is it ever enough? And that's what the Big Ten and the SEC are arguing right now. It's not enough. It's not enough. We feel like we're propping up the sport, and we're going to go take what's ours. Not yours, Big 12, ACC. Get the hell out of here, Pac-12. We don't want any of you around. We're going to take what's ours, and we're going to take a bigger piece of the pie in order to do that. Where does it end, though? That's my question with this. The NFL exists at its highest point because they're all about the 32. All 32 franchises are equal in the eyes of the NFL and the structure of that league, and it's how they profit so highly from everything. So where does it end in college sports? Because I would say if you want to just go sheerly on survival of the fittest, maximize profit, why does the Big Ten and SEC exist as it does right now? Why not combine the top 7 schools in each of them and go form your own super league? Why not take the top 10 and have a 20-team super conference? There are schools at the bottom of those leagues that don't bring in as much money or don't generate as much television revenue. So why are you beholden to that when you're not beholden to anything else? Because it's never been well, I shouldn't say ever. There was a time where the Power 5 existed, and then it was something that it was mutually beneficial for everyone. But they still went out to get theirs, ultimately in the end. So where does this thing end? Do we blow up the Big Ten and SEC also? And do Greg Sankey, does he form whatever's the new league that's just the best of ACC, SEC, and Big Ten? I just don't think this thing's ever going to stop.
Well, I think they're already doing the best of. And hear me out here. What the bottom tier of the two conferences, the schools, the programs, they're feeding wins to the top, right? It's already the college football playoff was made up of how many teams roughly that were represented every single year? This new model is going to give buys to the SEC and the Big Ten, right? It's going to allow automatic qualifiers. To me, you're going to have the same teams again, and having the conferences with the programs at the number that they are right now provides inventory for all of these different platforms and all these networks to provide games and live content to sell ads where their advertisers want to be a part of live content, specifically football. If you went to a much smaller conference, much more compacted, you're not going to have the same amount of inventory and distribution. And even though you have schools that are just latched, I mean, Vanderbilt comes to mind, not competitive in the SEC. They are, in essence, much like the Big 12 and the ACC, latched on to the SEC getting that check. And that, I mean, the Big 12, you mentioned the Pac-12. The Big 12 took teams from the Pac-12 to survive. Teams went to the Big 12 to survive. Everybody's doing this in some shape, form, or fashion. And the SEC and the Big Ten are doing it at the very top, where right now the report is, Yahoo Sports says that the current talks that the ACC and the Big 12 are discussing the option to just concede the financial front. One proposed solution, SEC and Big Ten would receive around 58% of the college football playoff revenue. That is around $760 million. And then the ACC and Big 12 will receive around $440 million. And you see that once you have this locked in, that's locked in. The revenue is only going to go up. And so will the power of the Big Ten and SEC. It's going to happen. And I think that the pushback is laughable now because you had Greg Sankey, last August, coming out and saying, yeah, we're not getting very far with the proposed 12-team playoff, right? Because he wanted a 16. And the push was, if we're going to a larger playoff, we want more representation from everyone. The vote, if you took one then, was not going to be in favor of expanding. And then all of a sudden, it was a unanimous vote that we're expanding.
Yeah, look, I don't want any of this, okay? I'm on board with the way it was just fine. But the reality of it is, if there's more money to be had, they're going to find more money from television networks, so it's not going to end. So my thinking now is, just like the conversation we had about college football players, if your only desire is to make the highest dollar amount while you're in school, that's not the best way to make decisions. If that's your sole focus, is just the highest dollar amount, I don't think that's the best way to make decisions. But the Supreme Court has said it. You have the right to do that if you want, if you're a college athlete, and that's fine if you want to go about it. I'm telling you, that would not be the right way to make every decision. But if that's what we're doing, and I think that's what's happening right now in college football, and the powers that be in college football aren't even denying it anymore. There's no talk of student athlete or what's best for them, or, hey, we're a nonprofit organization here, and we're trying to do what's right about leadership and development of young people. None of that anymore. It's all about the highest dollar figure. Well, I'm here to tell you the highest dollar figure is not just the Big Ten and SEC staying together in its current form. The highest dollar figure is you take 3 or 4 of the dead weight programs in both of those leagues, and both leagues have them, and you can replace them with North Carolina, with Florida State, with Clemson, with Notre Dame. There are others out there you could add that have bigger brand value from lesser conferences, and you could make hay with a 40 to 50 team super conference that may not include every current Big Ten or SEC member. If it's all about more money, I'm presenting you with a way to make more right now. Now, you got charters and contracts and all that. You can't just blow up. But if those contracts end and you want to go get more money from streaming services and from networks and everything else, here it is. That's how you do it. Don't. I hope you don't. But if your sole focus is money-driven and making the most possible money, that's the way you do it. It's just one league like the NFL, and I don't know what the number, maybe it's 42. But you're cutting some Big Ten and SEC schools, not many, but maybe 2 to 3 at the very bottom of the conference, and you're adding whoever you want across the country that's not currently in one of those two leagues.
Some of that is what contractual based.
Yeah, and then Hutton, to your point, there's no bye week like the NFL, right?
Right.
Those 40 programs, it's not like you're looking at your schedule and saying, boy, this is going to be really easy when we go on that road trip to Texas A&M.
Right.
You know, if you're Washington or whoever. It's like the NFL. Anyone can beat anyone, and you're generating a system that's more equitable across the board.
And what they also want, and they being the very top of all the negotiations, and it's really the networks, right? Everyone wants a slice of what this is going to be. You have to have enough inventory weekly to provide that, right? Like the NFL, even the 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff games have some type of impact on that week. And that is traditionally the fifth game at 1 p.m. with the worst broadcast crew is still providing some type of revenue to a CBS or Fox that afternoon, you know?
Yeah.
They're still going live to Kansas City and Chicago in a 41-10 blowout because Taylor Swift is in attendance. That's what the networks want, but you have to provide that extra game, that extra content, even though Chicago's not that good, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to do that on more of an omni-channel presence, which is what I think the SEC and Big Ten would love. The Big Ten's doing it, where they're spreading out their platform. The SEC's going more ESPN, but now ESPN's partnering digitally with Fox and with Time Warner. So
I mean, I really think there is a scenario that we are so football crazed, Hutton, that the scenario I'm laying out of that NFL of college football, they could get close to NFL level revenues if they all joined forces with even more teams and offered it omni-channel the way we're talking about, and they spaced it out properly.
Well, then the streaming services come in.
Well, if you started on a Wednesday night, let's say there's a college game on Wednesday night or whatever. If you start on Wednesday night and said, here are the 42 top college football programs branded, and this is now the NFL of college football, whatever that league is called, and they go to market and they shop with NBC Universal, they shop with Paramount, CBS, Disney, ESPN, Apple TV, Prime Video, everyone, just like the NFL, gets in bed with all of these different companies and said, here's how we're going to do it, Fox.
Right.
Wednesday night football, the highest level of college. Thursday night football, one highest level of college, one highest level, the NFL. Friday night football, already happening with Fox. We've got a Friday night game that's going to be on every Friday night. Saturday's a smorgasbord of games in the main league of college football that everyone's going to pay attention to, and it's going to be far more recognizable because there's fewer teams to know about, like the current setup of college football, which is one of the reasons I think college football is awesome, is that there's so much to keep up with. But in our short attention span society, it will be better for the consumer if there's less teams to worry about, much like you have the NFL on Sunday, where it's very easy to consume and easier for all of us to keep up with what happens with every team because there's only 32 of them. This is the most profitable world for football. I hope it doesn't go that way, but that's how you make the most money. It's plain and simple. And I feel like as the years tick on and contracts run out, we're eventually going to get to this conclusion.
Now, the other part of this, and I'm curious how much this plays a factor, is NIL and just transfer portal and the ability for the player to go get paid based on his name, image, likeness. In the scenario that you're going to consolidate all of this into a smaller pot, you're going to have the biggest name brands in that group, and that's it. And I mean, you would save the NCAA with everyone else, but also you would definitely have a players association in that model. And that, if you're about revenue, they're going to get a bigger slice of that revenue. You're not grandfathered in based on what is going to happen with whatever they agree to in this model.
It's going to be a sliding scale of how much, what the piece of the pie is for each team.
But now with all of the different athletes that are making, $600 to be a part of the video game and that aspect. I mean, right now, 9% is so low compared to, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do you make sure, again, from the business side of it, I'm not agreeing with this. How do you make sure, if you're just all about the money, that you cap it now and you don't make it float to the top and make it become something where you're splitting revenue with someone else? That's not what they want to do. And the more players you have is actually helping them because the vast majority of the players that are getting paid are not getting paid that much. They're getting paid based on, the barbecue stand down the street or $600 to be a part of a video game from EA Sports. And they're happy with it, I'm saying.
I'm no lawyer here, but I think there is a way to make this work without the players having to unionize or to form a players association. Now, it would take some good faith from the league on behalf of this, but it would be a percentage of television revenue that goes right back to the players.
Right.
And instead of pay for play, we all know it's really pay for play, but instead of pay for play, what it is, if you want to make it fair, there's no transferring until after 3 years. You sign a scholarship with someone. You're at that school for 3 years unless they release you and allow you to go somewhere else. And you're paying for the rights to their name, image, likeness. So I'm not paying you to play, but I have a set amount of money based on the revenue that I have at Virginia. And at Virginia, my coaches and my personnel department, which every program is going to have a GM now, we decide what we allocate to whom in recruiting. So we're going to go overpay for this quarterback that's from our state because we want to overpay. And we might not have as much money to pay our interior offensive line, but that's just the way we're going to structure it. Every school has their own strategy, but you're not paying them to play as employees. You're giving them a cut of revenue for the rights to their name, image, likeness. So as a school now, I can go and market you in any way that I want. With all of our corporate sponsors, all going to one place. Collectives are taken in-house. They work. They go out to the community. They get sponsorship. They incorporate the school sponsors that are already there. You're taking that money. Players are doing endorsements, but you're really just paying for the rights to have their name, image, likeness for the 4 years or 3 years or however long it is that they're at your school. Again, I'm sure that some lawyer could poke holes in that.
Yeah.
But I think that's the one way to make it work and make it fair for everyone. And maybe we get there.
There's got to be a bigger reason why they're okay with the Big 10 and the Big 12 and the ACC taking part of this revenue, right? For the current model. And to me, it's more about the networks and how they're involved in these talks.
Yep.
More so than Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, who are holding the power. They're running the show. Chad, Caitlin Clark running the show in women's college basketball. She's about to do it in the WNBA. But there is a column at the USA Today from Lindsay Schnell with this, titled this, Women's Basketball Needs Faces of Future to be Black. Enter Juju Watkins and Hannah Hidalgo, saying that in a game, in a sport that's dominated by black players in women's hoops, that the WNBA is 70% black. Too often that black players who built women's hoops haven't been acknowledged. Saying that it's important that the future of women's college basketball is black instead of white, like Caitlin Clark. Chad, looking back on the last 2 or 3 decades of women's college basketball, I think of Shamika Holdsclaw, Cheryl Miller, I think of Candace Parker, and while you have Diana Taurasi,
I think of Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca Lobo also,
Rebecca
Sue
Lobo,
Bird.
Diana Taurasi,
When I think
Brianna
UConn,
Stewart.
Yeah, when I think UConn, I think white girls. Quite frankly, white superstars.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember this being an issue at all. It brought popularity, it brought interest to women's college basketball. And, I mean, in the same breath that you could write it, they're writing this column as a freedom of thought, and they're putting this on paper in the USA Today. The WNBA just became the marketing arm. The face of the WNBA is about to become white. So is that also an issue? No. It's organic, and it's not about color. It's about what matters, the talent and the interest. And there's interest in women's college basketball because of Caitlin Clark. And it's not because she's white, it's because she's great.
Well, first off, let's look at the headline again here. I just want to show this as an example. This is virtue signaling 101 right here. Lindsay Schnell, white woman, with the story about women's basketball needs their face of the future to be black, is just comical on a lot of different levels. Look, I don't care, right? I'm not watching women's basketball because the face of women's basketball is white or
Right.
black. I admire
That's what I'm saying about
greatness.
the past. Just thinking about
I
it.
admire greatness at all turns, but I mean, let's also be completely honest here. I want to be intellectually honest on this show. It helps that Caitlin Clark is attractive, just like it helped that Candace Parker was attractive. And now I'm talking about a white woman and a black woman. It helps that Tom Brady is good looking with his celebrity. It helps that Aaron Rodgers is good looking too. I think there's a looks element to it. I don't think it's a racial element with it. The hope for women's college basketball is that Caitlin Clark, who, has been helped by all those great players that Hutton mentioned, Cheryl Swoops and Candace Parker and Cheryl Miller and Rebecca Lobo and Sue Bird. I'm naming women of different races when I talk about this, that it propels the sport into a different stratosphere of interest, not just by girls and women, but by boys and men also that admire the play of the players. And they admire the game and the way that it's played. I don't think that it matters one bit if the next face of college basketball is white or black. I think that just like, I've heard this countless times from minorities that say it was really cool to have representation when I turned on the television and saw someone who looked like me. I think that's likely important. And I bet there's some farm kids in Iowa and Nebraska and Illinois that turn on the TV and say, man, Caitlin Clark looks like my little sister. Caitlin Clark looks like the girl I know in middle school. And that probably draws people to the game. Great. You know who loves it? Fox, our employers. Because millions of people are watching college basketball because of it. I don't see that as a bad thing. Just like I don't see it as a bad thing if a small black girl from inner city wherever is hooping for her respective team, and that's bringing in more black fans. Great. Black, white, whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. I just, the whole thing is virtue signaling at its worst, and who cares?
Yeah, I mean, Angel Reese was a household name last year for women's college basketball, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's gone away from taking it.
But Caitlin Clark is the show.
Well,
she's
Angel Reese was a part of the show last year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. She was mentioned as much as Caitlin Clark last year.
I don't think she's in the same stratosphere.
Not now. Not now, but I mean, Angel Reese was talked about more on this show than Caitlin Clark last year. Last college basketball tournament. No doubt.
I mean, her antics were talked about on the show.
But as far as the face of college basketball, it doesn't have to be a positive one or a negative one. It's just who's drawing interest. She was up. If you mentioned Angel Reese, you knew we were talking about women's college basketball.
Yeah, I don't think that.
How many players in the WNBA could you mention?
Well,
and I know it's WNBA.
Here's what I hate about articles like this, though. If ratings go down next year, and spoiler alert, they're likely to go down nationally because no Caitlin Clark. But this leaves it out there now to say, well, that's because people are racist. The ratings went down because there's no white. The superstar college basketball is no longer white.
Well, if the ratings go up, ratings go up in the WNBA, or is it because of racism?
It's because of racism. That's what Lindsay. I'm not arguing that.
Oh, no, yeah.
Lindsay Schnell of USA Today. We can show you the headline again. This is her column. It is rinse and repeat. You could copy and paste this next year when the Indiana Fever set record-breaking numbers in attendance and television numbers next year. She's going to come back and say, racist America. Couldn't watch the WNBA when it was dominated by black superstars, but now Miss America Caitlin Clark is there, and suddenly everybody's tuned in watching the game. It's stupid. It's race-baiting stupidity to me.
But in the history of just the most legendary players from, Don Staley to Cheryl Miller, Cheryl Swoops, what does it matter if now the most dominating player is white versus black? It doesn't. Yeah, unless you want to make it a headline, unless you want it forced and you want it scripted and you, like you said, it's virtue signaling, and nothing can be organic anymore. It's like the Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl, I believe it was, where you had Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. we mentioned them. We didn't even cross our minds that the 2 quarterbacks were black. Didn't even cross our mind. But it was brought up because of, a columnist wanting to point this out, or ESPN wanting to force feed it.
I'll say this about Dawn Staley now that she's running, the head of South Carolina, and they're by far the most dominant program in women's college basketball, and they're trying to finish off an undefeated season. Right now, they're undefeated in the SEC tournament, I think playing right now or played earlier today. She embraces the villain role, and I think that's good for women's college basketball. She's very much – there's a lot of John Thompson vibes with her. Whether it be – what was the whole thing with BYU? She wouldn't schedule BYU or canceled a game because of that. It turned out to be an erroneous story about racial slurs being said, but she wouldn't back down from it. I mean, John Thompson built that Georgetown brand on being the black program. And he had all of black culture, hip-hop music, everything. They were wearing Georgetown starter jackets, and it was us against the world. They won a national title doing that. I mean, he coached Patrick Ewing and Dikembe Mutombo and Alonzo Mourning with that type of style. And now Dawn Staley is dominating women's college basketball. Again, I think that it's not just either or, like this Lindsay Schnell piece is writing, right? There's different vibes for everyone, and it's about what you're looking for. So if the next superstar of women's college basketball is white, who cares? Because here's Dawn Staley still dominating the game as this outspoken black voice. I think all of that is good in the mix of everything, and it leads to more and more people watching the sport, and I hope more and more people watch the sport. My guess is, though, that ratings will slip next year without Caitlin Clark. And we've asked the question, I don't know the answer, what it's going to do for WNBA ratings. Don't know.
I mean, isn't it just horrible for the sport that the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball history, in basketball history, is white?
Oh, I know.
That's the next headline.
You know what I haven't heard a lot of, though?
Asterisk next to that.
People saying that a black person needs to break Pete Maravich's record that she just broke. That's not the argument that I've heard. Hey, majority of great college, basketball players in general are black. We need a black man to pass Pete Maravich now, all-time scoring. I have not. I think I just gave USA Today the idea for their next column. So that they'll probably write about that next week.
Was that not a headline when Detroit Mercy couldn't get into a postseason?
Oh, of course, yeah. They're keeping this guy down in his sixth year.
They won't pay for this CBI tournament.
6th-year Detroit Mercy, the coach's son, can't go play in this third-level tournament behind the NIT.
Yeah. Chad, you've got to be a woman in order to play in the next golf tour, the Women's Pro Tour. That, according to golf CEO Stuart McKinnon, through a press release, now you've got to be a woman to play on the Women's Tour. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for clarifying this. There are 2 genders. Let me be very definitive here. 2 genders, male, female. And the Women's Pro Tour should be played by women. Competitive fairness is what they're pointing to. That's what we've pointed to throughout. And this is a no-brainer.
So the controversy was sparked by Haley Davidson and a transgender person. And the argument is, and I'm looking for the Instagram post. This is from Haley Davidson. Effective immediately, I've been removed, banned from the next 3 tournaments that I had already signed up for and been approved to play. They changed their policy mid-season after me signing up already and being second in the Player of the Year race. Surprised they were second in the Player of the Year race because they have been dominating these tournaments so far. So that shocked me a bit. This is logical. This makes sense. I didn't know what the next tour was until I saw this story this morning. This is also a very good PR move for the next tour to do this on International Women's Day and announce this. They're going to gain a lot of fans for doing this, and good for them because this is the right move, and it is what makes sense.
Well, and it doesn't matter what the transition has been. This is based on it's biologically female.
Yes.
Biologically female.
Because Haley Davidson's argument is the surgery happened years ago, and I think submitted to a hormone test even, but probably wasn't favorable for the competitor with the hormone test and what it came back with. So, again, right move by Next. Hopefully other organizations follow suit. I also think this is a stroke of marketing brilliance by the next tour, because they've got us and others talking about the next tour that I had to honestly do research on what exactly it was when I heard of this story. So for a tour that's trying to grow, smart move to make this announcement and be in the news on International Women's Day.
From the
Also
from
the
Ken
right
and-
move. Also the right move.
Yes, yes. The logical move, as you said. Honored to lead in promoting and advancing women's golf, providing a platform that not only highlights the exceptional talent of women golfers worldwide, but also ensures the competition remains equitable for all of our players.
Amen.